The first night was cruel. Rain stabbed like spears. Wind moaned like voices from the sea. They huddled in a cave, bones clashing from the cold. One man tried rubbing sticks. Another struck stones. Sparks came, then vanished. Children whimpered. Elders stared into nothing. The island did not care. On the fourth night, when even the strongest began to fold, a boy, desperate, angry, slammed two flint rocks together. Once, twice, and then ... light. A single spark. A gasp, then flame. Not warmth, not safety. But hope. Around that fire, their eyes lit for the first time. In that flickering glow, humanity reawakened. The first night was cruel. Rain stabbed like spears. Wind moaned like voices from the sea. They huddled in a cave, bones clashing from the cold. One man tried rubbing sticks. Another struck stones. Sparks came, then vanished. Children whimpered. Elders stared into nothing. The island did not care. On the fourth night, when even the strongest began to fold, a boy, desperate, angry, slammed two flint rocks together. Once, twice, and then ... light. A single spark. A gasp. Then flame. Not warmth, not safety. But hope. Around that fire, their eyes lit for the first time. In that flickering glow, humanity reawakened. Hunger makes animals of men. On the seventh day, meat ran out. But the island whispered another chance. Tracks in the mud. Broken branches. Then, rustling in the dark, a wild boar. Fangs like knives. Rage in its breath. They fled that night, but returned the next. Sharpened sticks became spears. Fear became silence. And silence became the moment. When the beast charged, they didn't run. They struck. The boar screamed. Blood met fire. That night, they did not starve. That night, they became predators. The ocean had once nearly killed them, but now it shimmered with silver shadows. They stepped in, careful, quiet. Beneath the waves, fish darted like arrows. Spears became nets of twisted bark. Stones became traps. They learned to breathe, like the tide, to strike like light. Each fish caught was more than food. It was proof. They were learning. And the island, for a moment, fed them back. A blade is not just stone. It is memory made sharp. They struck rock against rock, sparks flew, fingers bled. But slowly, from chaos came form, axes, scrapers, knives. The jungle fell to their edge. Wood became shelter. Meat became clean. And in stone, their minds spoke for the first time. The rain came harder. They could not live under rock forever. With branches and bark, they built. Bone was used like rope, leaves like skin. And when the shelter stood, crooked, humble, leaking, they laughed. For the first time. They were not just surviving. They were living. The forest was not silent. It watched. When a hunter vanished, they carved symbols in trees. Eyes glowed in branches. Tracks moved backwards. The jungle was alive, but so were they. And now, they watched back. Deep in a cliff, they found stories. Hands, spirals, eyes, suns. This place had held life before theirs. They lit torches, added marks. For the first time, they told their story, not with words, but with fire and stone. The ground spoke, a low rumble, smoke, heat. Birds vanished. The sea pulled away. They ran, not from fear, but from understanding. When the fire erupted, they were gone. The island could not kill what had already become legend. That night, they circled fire. Meat roasted. Stories passed in silence. No longer prey. No longer lost. They had built. They had hunted. They had remembered. From ash and stone, they had become The first people. And this island, this nameless, violent, beautiful place, would never forget them again. At sunrise, when the fire had faded to a soft bed of coal, something unfamiliar sat in its place. A shape, pale, spiraling, half buried in the ash. No one had seen it before. No one knew who placed it there. The tribe gathered slowly like animals sniffing an unknown scent. The child reached first. His fingers brushed the spiral's curve, and instantly the air shifted. Not colder, not warmer, but deeper. The ground didn't shake, but resonated. The artifact was smooth like shell, yet heavier than bone. Symbols circled it, rough shapes, eyes, lines, circles, carved by a hand that once knew purpose. No. One spoke, but something ancient awoke. That day they did not hunt. They built a ring of stones around it, feathers, bones, smoke. It sat beside their fire now, not an idol, not a tool, a witness. They didn't know what it remembered, only that. The island was not silent anymore. It was watching, and for the first time, whispering back. The island exhaled, not through leaves, not through sea, but from its core. A dry, strange wind crept down from the mountains. It wasn't loud, it didn't sting, but it carried a scent no one recognized, like ash, stone, and something buried. Birds flew low. The air no longer echoed with insects. The elder pressed his hand to the dirt. "It breathes," he said again, this time with dread. That night the fire fought back. Sparks snapped sideways, smoke swirled and refused to rise. The spiral pulsed, a soft vibration, faint, but impossible to ignore. The tribe said nothing, but no one slept. They sat in silence, back to back, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. And high above, behind the clouds, something glowed red, just for a moment. A sky flicker, a warning. The earth was stirring beneath their feet. The island was changing. They saw it at dawn. A thread of smoke, faint, drifting above the highest ridge. It wasn't fire. Not yet. The scarred man stood longest, eyes locked on the plume. His hand tightened around a stone blade. Some said to move camp. Others said to wait. But no one dared raise their voice. The spiral no longer glowed. It watched. That night, dreams came fast and strange. Falling rocks, fire under the sea. A mouth beneath the mountain. When they awoke, animals had fled. The air was still, and the mountain breathed. The forest changed. Roots twisted like ropes. Bark peeled in rings. Leaves curled before they fell. But it wasn't the plants that frightened them. It was the carvings. Lines in the trunks. Too precise, too deliberate, not claw marks. Not wind damage. Messages. The spiral pulsed again that night, faint but steady. The child saw shapes in the flames, hands, eyes, circles. The elder carved the same symbols into stone. "We are being spoken to," he said, and warned. It came at night. Soft at first, a murmur through the ground, like distant thunder whispered through soil. The spiral rolled. Just slightly. The fire crackled upward. Then, silence. The tribe froze. The scarred man stood. "It's moving," he said, and it was. The island groaned, not loud, not violent, but alive. Rocks shifted. Trees bent without wind. Birds called out, not in song, but alarm. This was not a storm. Not a beast. It was the island itself, remembering its hunger. Dusk brought no stars, only smoke. It rose behind the mountain, heavy and slow. A column, not black, but red, like blood diluted in water. The tribe gathered in silence, watching it grow. The old hunter picked up dust and let it fall. It didn't drift east like before. It rose. Birds flew nowhere. The air was warm but dry, as if fire breathed beneath their feet. Then a low groan echoed through the trees. Leaves trembled. Roots cracked underfoot. The spiral fell from its resting place and rolled to the fire as if drawn. No one touched it. No one dared. That night they packed their few things. Not because they knew what was coming, but because the island did. The forest grew darker even before the sun fell. It was not night, but something older than night. Trees leaned closer together. Their shadows lengthened unnaturally. Birds that once sang now circled in silence. The tribe moved cautiously, sticking to old trails, but the paths twisted. Familiar trees bore unfamiliar bark. Then they saw them, markings, not carved by tools, but seared into the trunks, spirals, circles, repeating eyes. They were not alone. As they walked, shadows flickered. Beyond the edges of firelight, someone or something was watching. Not a beast, not wind, but memory. And memory now had eyes. They found it at the river. A carcass, twisted, split, not torn by claws, but burned, flesh cracked, bones blackened. The scarred man crouched beside it and whispered, "No teeth did this." That night, the animals did not cry. The forest held its breath. And then, distant beyond the cliffs, a sound. A call, long, hollow. Neither beast nor bird. The children clung to the elders. Even the fire seemed afraid, burning lower than it should. They did not speak its name, because no one had one. But every soul understood it did not belong to this island. It was older, and it had returned. That night the stars blinked. One by one, the sky, once clear, split with silent flashes, pale white cracks across the firmament. No thunder, just light. The tribe gathered around the fire in silence. They clutched bone charms, drew spirals in ash. Even the bravest could not explain what they saw. The elder stood, arms raised, muttering words not taught, but remembered. The wind circled inward. The spiral pulsed. Then the ground rumbled. A long, steady breath from the mountains. Heart. And in the sky, a streak of fire, not lightning. Not a god, but something falling, something returning. Morning came gray. Ash blanketed the ground like snow. The spiral had changed, the symbols deeper, glowing faint orange. No one spoke. They simply packed. Tools, stones, hide. The elder led them inland, not toward water, not toward trees, but toward the mountain. The fire behind them was left burning. A signal, or an offering. As they climbed, the air grew quiet like a held breath. They saw old carvings on the rocks, shapes they'd drawn long before they ever lived. Hands, suns, spirals. The scarred man reached out and whispered, "We've been here before." And the island remembered him. The path grew steeper. Stones loosened beneath their feet. And then a crunch, not of rock, but bone. Beneath the ash, buried shallow like forgotten memories, were remnants, ribs, teeth, skulls. Too many for one creature. The elder knelt beside one. Its forehead was carved. A spiral. This was not the site of death. It was the site of sacrifice. They stepped with more care. The air thinned, the mountain loomed. And as they moved, they realized they were not the first to walk this path. Not by centuries. The spiral in the woman's pouch grew warm. The ground no longer rumbled. It waited. The entrance was hidden behind a wall of vine and mist. A stone crack, barely wide enough for breath, but inside, space. A hollow within the mountain, smooth as if carved by wind. Spirals covered the walls, endless and ancient. Some painted, some burned, some etched with claws. The floor was black glass. It did not reflect light. It swallowed it. The spiral in the elder's hand vibrated, and the walls answered, glowing one by one. They stood still, not afraid, not worshipping, just remembering. This was not a tune. It was a memory, preserved in stone. They had lived under stars. But here, deep in the mountain, the ceiling shimmered like night. Tiny stones embedded in the roof glowed with faint silver. A constellation not seen from any shore. The elder began to draw in the dust, mapping what he saw above. The child recognized one pattern. It was carved into the spiral. These were not stars. They were directions. A map, not to another place, but to another time. When the spiral glowed brightest, a sound came deep, slow, like the sindo, like the breath of the island itself. They sat, unmoving, listening. Not to a god, but to memory older than them all. In the center of the chamber was a circle, blackened, scorched, yet cold. Fire had once burned here, but it left no smoke, no ash, only shape. When the spiral touched the ground, the circle lit, but with no flame. A glow like memory. Each tribe member stepped into the circle. One by one, they saw things. Visions, a great exodus, a storm of light. Faces not yet born. No words passed between them, but every eye told the same story. They had returned, not to a home, but to a promise. Morning rose beyond the cave, not bright, but golden, like something old waking gently. The spiral no longer glowed. It was still and heavy. They left the chamber without words. Their bodies had not changed, but their eyes had. Outside, the ash had cleared. The sky blew again. Birds returned in cautious pairs. The earth no longer trembled. They walked downhill, back toward the place they had once feared, not to escape, but to begin. The child carried the spiral now. The elder walked behind, and the mountain, once full of memory, whispered just one thing before silence returned. Now you know. At the foot of the mountain, the soil was soft, black, warm, waiting. They dug with bare hands, planting roots gathered long ago. Not for food, not yet, but because something inside told them to. The spiral rested now, silent, cool, placed. At the edge of the field, the scarred man built a circle of stones. Not for worship, but for memory. Birds called above. Rain gathered gently in the distance, and when the first sprout broke through the ash, the child smiled. Life returned, not as prey, not as fire, but as green. They had endured flame, hunger, fear. Now they would learn patience. They were not just survivors anymore. They were planters. The island had burned. The river had dried weeks ago. Now it flowed again, cold, clear, fast. They followed it in silence, retracing their steps. The place of their first fire was gone, burned away. But in its place, reeds grew tall and gold. Fish darted in the shallows. The child waded in, laughed for the first time in moons. They washed the spiral in the water. The elder whispered something soft, something no one had heard before. It was a name. For the island, not of ownership, but of thanks. That night, they lit a fire by the river, but not to survive. To remember. They drew a circle in the clearing, with stone, ash, and branch, not to trap, but to hold stories, names, paths. They placed their tools inside it, symbols of what they had become: a flint blade, a fishing hook, a feather. And in the center, the spiral. The child looked up and asked, "What comes next?" The elder smiled. "Someone will follow. They will find us, and they will know we were here." The circle was not a boundary. It was a beginning. The wind rose once more, but this time it spoke, not in words, not in song. In memory. The spiral pulsed once, then faded, and in that moment, Each person remembered a vision of fire, of stone, of paths not yet walked. No fear, only clarity. They had been watched, not as prey, not as children, but as inheritors. The island was not alive. It was remembrance itself, and through them, it had spoken again. They lit one last fire, not for warmth, not for light, but as a promise. The smoke rose straight and silent. They did not stay. But they did not leave either. For every step forward, they carried something behind. Not the spiral, but the knowing. They were no longer only survivors. They were memory keepers. And long after their bodies returned to earth, the circle remained: stone, flame, wind, silence. And in the center, an empty place waiting for the next hand to reach. The island would remember, because now so would they.